Okay, good morning all. Welcome to Vishnu IS. I am Uday, and today I'll be discussing the history related questions from yesterday's prelims paper. By now, all those students who have given their exam should have realized that this year's paper was among the toughest in the last 10 years. That's no exaggeration because that's the general consensus among students as well as the faculty fraternity. Before I go into dealing with individual questions of history, which are nearly 21 in number, I'll just make some general comments on history section as a whole. No doubt questions have been difficult. How they have been difficult is that, first of all, the questions have come from non-standard sources. That is the common NCERTs and other standard books that we read. Questions have not come from them. Although there have been some easy questions which you can attempt, but still largely the paper was definitely on a difficult side. Moreover, the second way that they have made the questions difficult is by giving very lengthy questions, and sometimes 3 layers of questions we can find. Also, another way they have made it difficult was by going into too many details of the topics. The topics are familiar to us, but however, the points they have asked about those topics are going beyond the common textbook sources that we all refer. And the purpose of today's class is not to go for an elaborate discussion, but to just give you all an idea of the possible correct answers. Out of 21 questions, you will see most of them the answers that I'll suggest should be right, except 2 or 3 questions which are slightly ambiguous, and I'll point out those questions as they come there. And if you look at the distribution of the questions across the different modules, last year there were 15 questions and all the modules have been done justice: ancient, medieval, art and culture and modern India. However, this year medieval India has not been given any importance at all. Hardly one question you can say has come from that area, and that too from very unconventional dynasty. Ancient and art and culture have been given very great importance. Almost 15 questions have combined from these 2 sections. The 5 questions have come from modern India. Even in modern India, the questions are not really from the national movement per se. They have asked more secondary issues from the national movement period. Fine. So with this basic introduction, let us start going into the questions, and we will try to see. As I said, I'll not go into the deep discussions, but a rough idea for each of them. The first question is regarding the river systems in North India, that is Indus and the Ganga river system. Now, the question is definitely on a difficult side because we generally do not encounter such kind of source in any books that we commonly refer. Now, you might have seen the question. It's not really easy to go and read every point there in the question because you already know the question. We'll just try to understand the options. So the question is asking whether Indus and Ganga rivers were connected with each other at some point of time in the past, particularly in the Pleistocene period. And the question is asking you which of these 3 points will suggest that might be a probable conclusion that we can draw. The first one is Nadi Sukta of the Rig Veda. Now, generally we do not get into those details. However, because they've given that, we'll discuss a few points. The Nadi Sukta. Sukta means a hymn or a verse. Nadi here refers to, the Sanskrit word refers to river. So what does this Nadi Sukta of Rig Veda actually tell us about is discusses the rivers that are present in that northwestern part of the Indian subcontinent, particularly the Indus and its tributaries. However, Rig Veda was definitely a later document. It was not in the Pleistocene period. So the examiner is wanting us to kind of try to eliminate and get to the answer. So 1 cannot be the answer. 2, explorations of the Sutlej and Yamuna by Robert Bruce Foote. Again, see, we know this man's name. He is known as the father of Indian prehistory precisely because he was the first person to have discovered a Paleolithic tool, that too where in the deep south of India, that is in Pallavaram in Tamil Nadu. So it's very difficult that we expect Robert Bruce Foote having done some work on the river directions in the Pleistocene period. That's what examiner is again expecting. Definitely it's not easy for students while writing the examination. So the answer 2 is also not a correct explanation. Then the third is again kind of mixing geography as well, environment with this question. Is that the presence of the same species of dolphins in both the Indus and Ganga river system. Will this be a proof for the fact that these Ganga and Indus were connected at some point of time in the past? So as of now, the keys, what we understand is the 3 might be the most possible explanation. The reason behind that is dolphins are these river-based species. So if today these two systems, river systems, may not be connected with each other, but if you're finding dolphins in both the systems, that it might indicate that in the past, these 2 river systems were connected to each other. So answer would be only 3, that is D. The second question is coming from more regular classrooms and textbooks discussions, where you will find it's on Buddhism, asking you what does an empty seat in Buddhism represent. You have seen that in the early stages of Buddhism, that is the Hinayana branch, Theravada branch, Buddha was not represented in a human form. So he was worshipped in a symbolic form. And that's an easy question for those students who have prepared well. An empty seat, particularly if you'll see in the Sanchi Stupa iconography, there you will find many a times empty seat being represented under a tree. And what does it represent? It actually stands for Buddha sitting in a meditative posture. So here the answer will be A. Third question is again something which you should definitely attempt that to correctly, because it's coming from Vedic age, giving you a match the following question with some Sanskrit names on one hand and the modern names of those rivers on the other. And they're asking you which of these are correctly matched. Let us have a look at that. Vitasta is not Chinab, it is Jhilam. Whereas Ashikni is not Jhilam, it is Chinab. They have just kind of interchanged those two. Parushni is Ravi. That's the correct answer. However, fourth is also not matched correctly. Bias, if you'll see, the Sanskrit word in the Rig Veda is mentioned as Vipas. And there is another tributary of Indus, that is Sutlej, that which is mentioned as Shutudri. However, it's not here. So the answer will be only 3. 3 is the correct answer. Now you cannot afford to miss these 2 easy questions, because out of the 21 questions, these are some of those few which you can definitely pick up. Next, it's a question about Amaravati Stupa. Now you again see the trap of the examiner is that most of these questions we would have heard here and there. At least students who have studied well, they should have definitely encountered. But then what are the facts relating to Amaravati Stupa they're asking? Yeah, to some extent they might try to confuse us here. 3 statements have been given and asked which of them are correct. Amaravati Stupa located in Lower Krishna Valley. Yes, obviously it's in the Andhra region. That was one of the fertile areas, and under the Ikshvaku dynasty and the Shatavahana dynasty, this region was known for the flourishing of Buddhism. Second, in India, it was next only to the Sanchi Stupa in size. Now today we know that Amaravati Stupa is in ruins. We really do not have that entire structure intact, and that makes the Sanchi Stupa in Madhya Pradesh as a very more famous stupa in India. However, if you look at the reconstructed model of Amaravati Stupa, it suggests that it is not smaller than Sanchi. It's actually, it may have been larger than Sanchi Stupa also. So statement 2 goes wrong. Third, did Amaravati school of sculpture have an impact on South India and Southeast Asia and Sri Lanka? Yes, you can take a guess, because that's a more generic statement. Answer will be 1 and 3 are correct. The question coming from again ancient India, particularly with respect to Tamil history, that is Sangam age. Match the following question has been given here. 3 kings have been mentioned and asked the dynasty they belong to. The question you should be a bit careful, because they're asking which are not correctly matched. So if they're correctly matched, that will not be a part of your answer, right? So Sengutuvan Yes, the answer is actually belonging to Chera dynasty. Because that is correctly matched, it cannot be a part of your answer. 3. Nedunjalian is also belonging to the Pandya dynasty. So that's also correctly matched, so it cannot be the answer. So 1 and 3 must not be in the answer. So at least by elimination method you can get that only 2 is the answer. That is Udayan Jaral is not belonging to Chola, it's belonging to Chera. However, as I said, you may need not know exactly what dynasty he belongs to. At least you can identify that his 1 and 3 are correctly matched. That will help you get to the answer. Next. Next question is from modern India. Again, a familiar topic, but confusion is with the options. It's asking about what were some factors that became responsible for Subhash Chandra Bose forming the forward bloc as a separate party, although within the Congress party. 4 options have been given here. I'll give a tentative answer because there is some confusion with respect to these. The UPSC key that they finally give will be authoritative. Let us look at these options. First, Bose failed to win the confidence of Gandhi. Yes, that's definitely an answer. We all know that the kind of differences that started developing in the 1938 and 39 Congress sessions. Second, the Congress left was disunited and failed to support Bose. That can also be a possible answer because if you know that from 1920s, late 1920s and in the 1930s, the Congress party has started developing a left wing, that is with the socialist orientation. And Nehru and Bose were some important members of that wing. Here it seems that Nehru, although was a very important associate of Bose and shared that socialist ideology very deeply with him, when the question came about the strategy of the national movement, whether to launch a mass movement or not immediately, Nehru seems to have sided with Gandhi. So you can say the Congress left was also not very divided, and that's the reason why they failed to support Bose. Third, the communists did not support Bose in his endeavors. Now that we can generally eliminate because the communists had their own line of struggle, because they were not only struggling with the British, their fight was also against the Congress. So generally, they were not very much involved in the controversies that were going on inside the Congress. So most probably, as I understand, 3 may not be a part of your answer. But let us see, as I said, what UPSC will say. The 4th one, the supporters of M.N. Roy and socialist leaders like Jai Prakash Narayan preferred Congress unity to supporting Bose. So they preferred unity of Congress instead of supporting Bose when Bose decided to float another party. So answer could be 1, 2 and 4 only. The next question is about British annexation of Awadh. In the general textbooks that we all study, we get to study why Awadh was annexed and how annexation of Awadh was different from the annexation of other states, and how annexation of Awadh eventually led to the 1857 revolt. However, here the question has gone into the administrative reforms that the British had brought after annexation of Awadh. But still, a well-read student can make a guess, intelligent guess for this answer. So the 3 statements that are given there are talukdars were dispossessed of their estates. That is, talukdars are some kind of revenue collectors, playing a similar role to the zamindars. So they are saying they were dispossessed of their estates but allowed to retain arms and forts. Now you should understand that when zamindars' policing duties were removed, naturally we can expect that talukdars also, their policing powers and the armed forces that they used to maintain under them would have been removed, because that would have been a threat for the continuation of the British rule. So statement 1 should not be a part of your answer. And if we look directly, we can eliminate B and C. What remains is second and third options. Second, a summary revenue settlement was made in 1856 assuming that the talukdars were outsiders. That's correct. The reason is that the very basis on which Awadh was annexed was misgovernance. That was the reason stated by Dalhousie. And the real reason was behind that was to tap the revenue of the fertile Ganga plains that flow through the Awadh. So they wanted to displace the talukdars. And third statement is also correct because they wanted to collect revenue by themselves directly by giving a reason that the talukdars are oppressing the peasants. But the real reason is that they wanted that money into their hands directly. So third statement is also right. So you can go for 2 and 3. Next question is also from modern India relating to the Acts, 1919 Act. Not a very factual question, you can take a guess. They're asking about the separate electorates that have been introduced in 1909 Act, but they're again asking about the 1919 Act. Let us say the 3 points. Reforms retained and extended the separate electorates. Yes, we all know that, that's correct. Separate electorates were supposed to counter Indian nationalism, which was growing stronger because separate electorates is nothing but a manifestation of the divide and rule policy. So naturally that statement will also be correct. However, the third one is slightly controversial here. The reason I'm saying it's controversial is the statement is very sweeping. Deprived classes rallied around the favors inherent in separate electorates. Now, the framing of the question, I feel, this statement I feel is what is making it difficult to answer. Because no doubt, Ambedkar is one of the leaders of the separate electorates, wanted, the deprived classes wanted separate electorates for them. However, it doesn't mean that entire deprived classes really wanted separate electorates. However, for this session, I am taking that 3 is also a correct answer. So that will make D as the answer. However, as I said, let us wait for the final key of UPSC and see what they want to offer. The 9th question is like completely out of scope for this exam. However, that might have been there in the current affairs, the reason for which they asked this question. But then you can safely leave such kind of questions. They are very factual. And it's about the classical music of India. They have picked up one singer by name Pandit Mallikarjun Mansoor from Karnataka and is being asked from which of these schools does he belong to. Now, the gharanas that have been mentioned over there are all belonging to Hindustani classic, that is the North Indian classical music. However, the singer is from Karnataka, South India. So that is why that is how they wanted to trick you. However, you can leave this question safely because it's not easy to get. If you go on reading all these gharanas in every music, Hindustani and this thing, obviously we will become a classical musician ourselves. So that's a difficult question. Answer, however, is D, Jaipur and Atrauli Gharana. 10th question is again a very difficult one because we generally do not encounter this term called Kshetra Patni. The question is asking where do we encounter this term for the first time in which of these books. As of now, again, there might be a bit lack of clarity over here. The answer could be Atharva Veda because the word Kshetra Patni, Kshetra is like a area, Patni is like the wife or the lady of that area. Most probably that term might come in context of agriculture, that is the field. And the explanation that you find here is that in the early Vedic period, that is the Rig Veda, there is not much importance given to agriculture, although agriculture was there. By the later Vedic times, agriculture became more prominent. So maybe the explanation is that Atharva Veda could be the place where we find this word Kshetra Patni, which might be closely related to agriculture. 11th, again, completely a difficult question coming from classical music once again, but beyond the scope. Here they're asking us to find out a parallel for raga, particular raga called Bilawal in Hindustani music, to a similar raga in Carnatic music. Now you can understand that these questions are definitely meant to frighten you. They are not to answer here, definitely, because even musicians trained, I think, might find difficulty in answering this. Answer is D, Dhira Shankara Bharanam. 12th question again sounds familiar. However, slightly difficult to answer, particularly in the examination context. It's asking you about the 1926 Hilton Young Commission appointed by the British and what was the purpose of it. A good, well-read person generally here and there encounters this commission, but in a different context, that it was the basis of the recommendation of this commission that the RBI, Reserve Bank of India, was formed, and this commission itself gave its recommendations by analyzing PhD thesis written by Dr. Ambedkar, okay, on Indian rupee. This much a well-read student should be aware. However, the question is slightly difficult. Maybe 2026 being 100 years of the commission, they asked this question. So the answer here, without getting into the technicalities, is most probably, as we see, one. That is aiding the flow of remittances from India and maintaining India's credit worthiness. That is obviously, if they are changing the British and Indian currency ratio, so that should be in the favor of the British. So there were many British officers working in India who were sending remittances to their country back in Britain. So in order to facilitate those remittances and also to maintain Government of India's credit worthiness, because if Government of India has to take some loans from abroad, so the people should have that faith and trust in the system, the monetary system of India. So that could be the possible explanation. 13th question, they have deliberately tried to make it lengthy and confuse you all. However, that's a straightforward question which any well-read student must be able to answer. It's about the first coins that we find in India. The first statement says Pali texts contain the first definite references to coins like Kahapana, Nikha, Kamsa, Kakanika. Kahapana, if you see, it is nothing but Karshapana. Karshapana is a Sanskrit word. Kahapana is a Pali version. Nikha is nothing but Nishka here. Kamsa and Kakanika. Kakanika also we do encounter as form of Kakani, Masha and Kakani. Statement 1 is correct. Second, the literary evidence from Pali texts is corroborated by archaeological evidences of punch-marked coins from many sites, most of them made of silver. Yeah, we all know that the first coins in India were punch-marked coins. They were all, most of them were silver, a few of them were copper. Now the question is asking, the above statements have been associated with which of the following two? These are the 3-layer questions we were talking about. Emergence of urban life and transition to money economy. Obviously, answer is both. Again, a tricky question. Somewhat familiar words, however, difficult to answer in the examination. Which of the following temples has or have a Nagara style Shikara? Nagara style Shikara, definitely it's in the northern India. But the options, if you look at, they have given you 4 options, of which only one of them is Nagara. That is the third one in the northern India. That is Dashavatara temple in Diogad in Uttar Pradesh, which was built during the Gupta period. Now that definitely will have Nagara. So option 3 must be there. However, what is difficult is to select the rest of the 3. And if you look at the 4th, Virupaksha temple in Pattadakal. Now you should not confuse, because Virupaksha temple is there in another place, Hampi also in Karnataka. But here in this context, the Pattadakal temple was built by the Badami Chalukyas. Okay. However, that is according to a Dravidian style, because if you know that in central India there is a style called Vesara, which is generally a mixture of northern and southern. However, here in this context, it's very difficult to find this out here. And particularly if you look at the first 2 options, I think even both Badami and Ahole come from Karnataka area. If you go and ask even Karnataka students, possibly even they might not know what exact features they have. And they are expecting everyone to answer them correctly. Do not fall into trap of such kind of questions. If you feel unsafe, you simply leave them. But then, just to get an answer, answer 1, Malagitti Shivalaya is not a part. Huchimalli Gudi and Dashavatara temple are the answers here, 2 and 3. Next, a question from Jainism, but again out of scope. They're asking you, according to Jainism, life is existing in 4 different forms. Which of them is not included? They've given Devas, that is gods, Yaksha, that is demigods, you know that they are kind of guardian spirits of which are present in the nature. Yakshas and Yakshinis, okay, Yakshis. Manushya, humans. Tiriyancha, animals and plants. Actually, if you look at these, this one is wrong. Yaksha is wrong, it seems, because they divide, according to Jainism, 4 phases is like Devas is the higher plane where gods kind of live. Next comes Manushya, that is humans. Tiriyancha, that is animals and plants. And then comes Naraki, which is not mentioned here, the beings of the hell, the lowest levels, okay. And here, Yaksha is actually a prominent theme in Jainism, Buddhism as well as in Hinduism. However, in Jainism, Yakshas are considered a part of or a subtype of the Devas, it seems, okay. Now again, as I said, if you go on studying all these things, obviously, we will become experts in these religions. Next, again from art and culture, a difficult one. On painting, particular painting, they are asking about Hallisalasya, painting in Bagh caves. Bagh caves is one of the rock-cut caves in Madhya Pradesh. They are asking about one particular painting inside that caves. Again, we can easily see that it's a difficult question. Answer is A, a joyous folk dance that is being represented there. Next, 17th, again a very difficult question which we don't usually encounter in the common textbooks. This is talking about the place value system in Indian mathematics. Precise the reason behind giving this question is for students to understand that Indian civilization has made great contributions to the science and technology of the world, but however we have never been taught all these things in our textbooks. So they are trying to highlight, giving an indication that yeah, you will have to study more about India's contributions, not only in the field of politics and economics always, but in the field of science and technology as well. So the place value system, you all know in mathematics we study in childhood that suppose if you take a number like 27, so if you look at the value of 2 in this number 27 depends upon the place of that digit in the number 27. So it means like 2 into 10 plus 7 into 1. If you take 207, then it becomes the value of 2 is changing because of its place. So 2 into 100 plus 0 into 10 plus 7 into 1. That's how the 207 is formed. So they're asking this kind of notation system that the entire world uses today originated in India. So they're asking you precisely where did we get the first ever evidence of the place value system in Indian So the answer they have given, the options they have given, all the 3 are correct. It is in Mankani plates, it seems, from Gujarat that we find the first ever mention of this place value system intact completely. And from there, in India, it seems, second option saying it has become very general in all inscriptions across India. The answer says right. And third, from here, this place value system spread to other parts of the world as well, particularly to Southeast Asia. And the answer is all the 3 are correct. 18th question, although they have made it a bit lengthy to frighten you, waste your time. However, it's a straightforward question coming from Indus Valley civilization. They given 3 statements, we'll read that. There is a wide occurrence of spindle wheels in the houses, but absence of spinning wheels. Yeah, we know the spinning wheel came into India a bit later on. Spindle wheels were very, very common in Indus houses. Next, weights and measurement scales complete with graduations have been discovered. Yes, we know that there have been scales and this weighing scales as well as this long scales with calibration marks clearly mentioned. Third, there are houses built in large part with baked bricks around relatively spacious courtyards with their own wells, bathing platforms and large rooms. Now we all know this. Let us see what they want us to do with these 3 statements. Which of the following inferences can be drawn from the above statements? Only to confuse you all here. Otherwise, yeah, they could have framed the question in a more straightforward manner. Statement 1 suggests that spinning was a laborious activity done at home. Yes. Statement 2 suggests the extent of scientific knowledge that Harappans possessed. Yes, again. Third, statement 3 suggests the emergence of common property system. That's a clear no. Because if you are having a separate house and your bathroom for yourself, that clearly is not a common property, right? It's a private property. So the statement 3 will be wrong. So answer will be 1 and 2 only. 19th question, again coming from modern India, however not from national movement per se, although these two peasant movements that have been mentioned over here, Eka movement and Bardoli Satyagraha, may be seen as part of non-cooperation as well as civil disobedience. However, they don't come from the mainstream national movement, being asked from the peasant movements, etc. Again, it's a very lengthy one. The answer will be, for those students who have read it properly, they can easily go for this. C. Bardoli Satyagraha was against the enhancement of revenue, land revenue, while the Eka movement which went on in Uttar Pradesh was particularly against the local talukdars and zamindars who were extracting too many rents from them. 20th question, again a complete difficult one, lengthy, only to frighten you all. You will see that this is asking about the irrigation methods in Rigveda. Irrigation should be there definitely because they were practicing a bit of agriculture. However, with what instruments they were carrying on this irrigation and all is very difficult. And if you look at the kind of words that they tried to use here, Ashma Chakra, Ahava, Kulisha, Datra, Shreni, Parashu, obviously to frighten you all. Okay. So if you look at this, again they have given two statements about irrigation, and after which three statements again follow and asking you which of these will support the above two conclusions. Those who have done this, read this, you know, here it is second statement is not at all related to irrigation anywhere. So generally you can go for 1 and 3. With these 20 questions in one order, there is one last question that is there, but slightly in the later pages. 27th question, you can take this as part of current affairs also. However, it is because it's talking about a dynasty from the past, I am trying to see that, put it as part of medieval India. Here the question is upon Thai or Ahom dynasty. Ahom dynasty is a major dynasty that ruled for nearly 600 years in Assam. However, never in our textbooks we do find any mention about this dynasty. This dynasty is known for having defeated the Mughal Empire also several times, preventing the expansion of Mughals into northeast. But then this dynasty does not have much space in our textbooks anyway. So you can safely leave this question unless and until you have encountered this in your current affairs anywhere. The question that they're asking is with regards to something called Moidams or Moidams. What are these built by the Ahom dynasty? The answer is the third. They are burial grounds of the royals and nobles. So as I said, this was not a class for elaborate discussion, but only to give you a rough idea. But what could be the possible correct answers? Except for 2 or 3 questions, most of them what we discussed should be right. And let us wait for the final key given by the UPSC. Do not panic. UPSC is known for putting such surprises now and then. It doesn't mean that next year also things will be like this. One thing should become clear for you all, at least 21 questions from history clearly shows the importance of history. And however, next year they can bring it down to 4 or 5 also, you know that. But that you cannot bank upon that, because again they might throw a surprise, because you will expect that the number of questions for history might come down. And you might want to not give importance, but they may again throw a surprise. Okay? Do not feel dejected. Do your work. Even in this paper, students who have done their basic sources properly should have identified the easier questions and gone for them. And in such kind of papers, it's always wise to leave these unexpected questions that have come from very, very random sources. Thank you all.
Good morning.
Morning, Anand. There paper discussion.
Agriculture history check question, sir. Ancient.
ನಷ್ಟನಾ ಬಲ್ಲ 11 ಕೆಪಿಟಲ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ కొంచెం ల్యాబ్ ఉంది ఇలాంటి అంత ఇక్కడ మొదలైన క్లాస్ ఇక్కడ నన్ను వస్తుంది